I ran into Chelsea and I told her thank you again for the programs, and she was like, "Oh, thank you so much."
Yeah, that's great.
She's so sweet.
She's literally been helping with so many things. So I'm like, yes, let's do this.
No, I know. She's Wonder Woman.
Yeah, it is. But like, I'm trying to think about it. Like, oh, people are great. I'm talking about the. Yeah.
Think you'd be better with them.
Probably. I'll probably be like.
Okay, the Canvas presentation is on the laptop. When you move it on here, just
Yeah.
arrow.
Yeah.
If you want me to help students, give me a Canvas. Like
Which button do I click? Like this one?
Yeah, it'll be like this.
Okay.
Oh, wait,
Is it? Sweet.
yeah, no.
Hey, I hope you all enjoyed your breakout session and learned some valuable tools to use throughout the year. So now we're gonna move into our Senate sessions. So have you ever wondered what exactly does the Senate do? Your internal vice president, Henry Lala, and your liaison committee chair, Senator Iman Wahidullah, are going to break it all down for you right now and explain how you can engage with the Senate to support your entity's mission.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Thanks, Leanne, and all the other organizers for putting on such really incredible event. And from memory, it seems like the attendance this year has been really exciting. So I'm glad to be here with all of you.
Yeah, and just prior to that, just hello everyone. It is truly an honor and a pleasure to be here today. And just I want to reiterate and just say that how much I just truly respect of all this entirety, everybody that like I think all mentioned to come to this organization and to come to our meeting today in AS1. Association has been a very pre-finite safety journey ever since the beginning for the past 3 years or so. And I've been able to grow alongside it and see overcome and change over the past couple of years as well. And this is to my friends who are here today, to our continuing members, and especially to the members of guests. Welcome, and I hope that you're able to enjoy everything.
Thank you. Okay, so let's just begin with the basics. The ASU-CSB Senate is the legislative and the chief policy-making institution of the association. It's made up of 22 current active senators of 27 potential position. And it includes several constituent colleges, of course, and has different specific areas like transfer and international senators. We, of course, oversee legal code and are the ones capable of changing it. And of course, which contains the bylaws, policies, internal regulations. And the committees of the Senate oversee, as we'll get into in a little bit, the areas from internal affairs, which is liaison, advocacy issues, which was formerly basic needs, and support boards, commissions, and units in any way they might need us to.
Yeah, and just to tie a little bit additional information to that, some people might not know, but the Senate is frequently viewed as distant from everyday student life. It might not be seen as the connected to the average student on campus. However, it is very central to how Associated Students operates. And senators are not just your policy makers, they are the peers elected to ensure that our student concerns are reflected with our following decisions. And particularly legal code here is functions as overall our constitution of AS, which helps to provide us continuity, consistency, and fairness across all our terms.
Something very basic but important, when and where the Senate meets. So the Senate itself meets every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m., usually in the USEN in one of the rooms there, but it might change every now and then, depending on how long it runs, though we're trying to bring that in and get people out by 11 p.m. The flying A room of the USEN, yes. And importantly, something that is not really highlighted, the Senate standing committees also meet every week in the regular quarters of fall, winter, and spring. And this year, we're going to change it so that each committee meets in the Senate room, which is in AS Main, right in there where the offices are. Off to the right, that is the Senate offices. Each committee will meet there at a different time. They will be announced association-wide at the beginning of each quarter. And the thought behind this is to make them truly public meetings for the first time in several years. And there's several ways you can collaborate there. So there could be a project that is led by the Senate, the funding might come out of the BCU, because, we don't want to have those difficult conversations about funding only at the end of a year where we're asking for rollover. If we can collaborate there early on and make common use of our resources, then we'll have a much more closely engaged relationship. Or of course, it could come the other way around. So a representative of a BCU comes to a standing committee with a project idea, and you can develop it there. And of course, the finance committee meets Mondays at 4 p.m., which you're probably much more familiar with than the other committees.
Yeah, and just additional information tied towards the public advocacy about our city. Meetings are actually open to all students. Anyone is available to come see us, to come to participate and to speak for dialogue with us. From BCU chairs and staff, our public forum that helps provide direct space for input and just additional listening. And as already IVP Law mentioned, our weekly scheduling creates predictability and accountability to help us ensure that you guys know where to go to and where to find us whenever we have our weekly meetings. And we do have also hybrid and recorded formats to help just reinforce the transparency of what's going on in our particular meetings as well.
So you might be wondering, why is this thing important enough that we have to gather everyone in here as opposed to it being one of the breakout sessions? And it was the President Metzger's thought, which I think is right, is to walk you through how we do things over in the Senate, so we're all on the same page at the beginning of the year. And I'll just walk through these one by one. The Senate approves all appointments, which again is kind of a simple thing on the face of it, but actually really matters later on, in that you are not eligible for honoraria if the Senate has not approved your appointment, and there have been some issues with getting legal code up to date such that all positions are reflected on there. So this is a more important aspect than might first seem to be the case. And President Metzger has really helped us out by allowing for all other appointments except for BCU chairs, the vast majority of which have already been taken care of. So any appointments of regular board positions, as we'll cover later, can simply be sent to myself and the two presidents pro tempore of the Senate, Evan and Melanie, which will make it a lot easier. And we absolutely want to avoid issues of people not getting paid for their work simply because the step of being appointed by the Senate is not covered. The Senate checks, votes to approve all entity minutes, including funding and all other internal decisions by BCUs, which is, of course, is structurally important. Each BCU makes its own decisions, and then all are added, as I'm sure you guys are already doing, to the to be approved folder of minutes, and then the elected representatives in the Senate are the ones who have final say over that, be it funding decisions or anything else being decided at the BCU level. It, of course, approves honoraria after the honoraria committee meets and recommends amounts, which we should probably talk about in some depth association-wide. Very likely at the State of the Association later on this quarter, there will be some substantial changes there to make sure you get your checks on time and without any significant issues. It votes on a yearly budget, which is first presented by the president, and then through much deliberation in the finance committee and our amazing staff at financial operations, led by Michael and some other really capable officers there, it ultimately goes to the Senate for approval. It is the sole institution capable of changing legal code, including, this is really important, adding and removing positions or restructuring any other aspect of the association. This is, I think, one thing to highlight, because it might seem reasonable that a board internally might restructure these positions, but at the end of the day, this is a student government, and the only institution capable of, adding new positions or removing them, as should be the case at the federal level too, even though it's not so much, would be the legislative institution. And lastly, actually, no, a few more things, sorry. We have the ability to fund large-scale and impactful projects. This is through the High Impact Project, or HIP fund, Senate unallocated, and of course, A is undesignated, which we all have access to. And lastly, and certainly not least, it provides a space for members of the association and other students to voice their concerns, which this year we will try to drive through task forces focused on specific issues so that the regular, relatively more mundane function of the Senate can keep going, even as we discuss about issues that we're deeply passionate about.
Yeah, I mean, this already believes, I think you all have the foundational, concrete, informational savings towards that, but having the releasing perspective and stuff, that typically that is very critical and important for BCUs to establish this relationship when it comes to the Senate body and to the BCU, so we're able to facilitate and serve all the needs that all of you could require. whether it's from allocation of funding to your leadership. This pipeline of communication helps ensure us, from our Senate body, we have this ensure fairness to all of you, all organizations, while adhering to decentralization or miscommunication, and just doing our purpose and mission statement to support all of your equitable needs. But that's just an additional point.
Absolutely. Okay, this is something simple but important that I see. We all go through it. I've misstated it before. We misstated in the Senate, even campus media, which is trying to cover the function of the Senate. Call it the wrong one, but it is important for some structural reasons and it has some implications, so it's worth giving a distinction. So when the Senate passes a resolution, this is usually stating the Senate's position on an issue, and that could be, as we're probably aware with, it could be at the campus, at the state, at the federal, or even international level, or it could direct AS entity or staff. So for example, on digitizing honoraria at last summer, so summer of 2024, there were quite a few what are called directional resolutions passed there. And the former one that I described are called positional resolutions. And very crucially, resolutions cannot and do not change legal code. That's why we call them resolutions. So what the Senate has resolved, and they expire at the end of a Senate term. So in our case, this would be spring quarter, late spring quarter in 2026. And this matters because the Senate can set up temporary committees on a variety of issues. So there was one a few years ago on compliance issues that looked at the association's internal funding frameworks, this kind of thing. And that expired at the end of the year. So bills, on the other hand, can change AS legal code. It's the only mechanism that can. And this could be, of course, internal structure, adding or removing positions, even funding arrangements, et cetera. There are also motions or simple motions by which the Senate can approve a certain action. This could be as simple as motioning to thank all of you for attending this training, or sometimes can have a financial character, such as motion to approve $1,000 for whomever made this amazing presentation. But you can also do this kind of thing in a resolution. And there are certain weird sort of edge cases in which a motion can function as a resolution, or even to add a constitutional amendment onto the ballot for the spring general election, that would actually be a resolution. But generally, it's this simple distinction. Resolution is either position or directing, and bills are to change AS legal code.
Yeah, and just to provide some more simple takeaway from this, overall, we should do expect a collective stance about our Senate budget to expire at the end of the term. And those three last impacts by amending the legal code and shaping your structure, opinions, and legal code options. The motion overall, they just basically provide us a procedural framework for our attending our Senate meetings, just make sure our Senate business is going forward, and just overall, put it simply, resolutions represent our values, bills represent structure, and motions represent our processes. So that's a basic takeaway if you ever attend any Senate meeting and unaware about what some particular legal code wording might mean.
Well put. Okay, so I'll get into the basics of the Senate standing committees, and I know Iman will go into some depth on liaison. So there are 5 main standing committees, which I'll explain the 5th one later. But advocacy, as its former name, maybe more clearly explained, focuses on basic needs. So these could be projects on specific issues. They could be year-long initiatives, that kind of thing. The Finance Committee is, of course, the best known one, the one which most students engage with, in which you can go up and as an RCO request for funding, but it also funds internal projects. It, as I said earlier, helps decide the annual budget and has other such implications. So financial policies and procedures, those are usually drafted every year by the Finance Committee. Liaison, of course, directs the Senate's relationship with BCUs and the rest of the association. And outreach has a similar, as its name indicates, element of reaching out from the Senate, but rather than having it be with other entities in the association, it's with the rest of the student body, the campus, with our local stakeholders, that kind of thing. The 5th is the Honoraria Committee, which essentially gathers at the end of every quarter and deliberates on honoraria and sends that to be approved by the Senate. But it's not standing in the sense of it meets every week like the other 4 committees. Importantly, and I know Iman will get into this in much more detail, BCUs can approach any and all committees or individual senators in those committees to collaborate on projects, exchange ideas, or even get clarification on funding questions, which I would love to personally answer as well if there's any such questions.
Yes, just hi, especially for that one particular point that I feel well mentioned that especially this upcoming year with the transitional period and more just collaborative efforts that we're trying to do. All of these various committees that are within this year, every single particular person in this room should try to encourage them to reach out and interact with these social committees because in one way or another, they're all made to serve you and they have all particular efforts to help you in any specific or particularly that you need when it comes to your BCU or your individual requisitions or anything. But they're all here and are incredibly valuable services I recommend. Not just for myself working in the liaison committee, I would say it's definitely a very important stakeholder for all of you if you are working in internal operations, but you're all needing to help support and engage all the collaborations that whatever BCU or particular thing you have to offer. Okay, I'll probably get into this as similar to IDP Law mentioned, as someone who is working in these committees, start off right off the bat. One of the things I'd love to particularly mention to you all is that the liaison committee is one of the main infrastructures in the bridge to all of you to the Senate body. What we're basically made is that the liaison committee is unique in its way because it serves as the official bridge between the Senate, BCUs, and its staff. Our mission, our statement and goal is to help gather feedback on legal code and operations, drafts, and help present omnibus bills every quarter to help provide clarity on your particular procedures or legal code and whatever changes you might be having on a quarterly basis. But our committee also helps support BCUs with appointments, funding questions, and just events. So helping to ensure the consistent communication through your check-ins, memos, and media, or whatever just particularly needs, even if it's just basic info questions. We are your help extension and service to the Senate body. And just overall, the help identity statements. Our committee is particularly unique because they help in our direct service role to BCUs and staff to all of you to any specific need you require. We hope to provide structured opportunities for your feedback to help ensure that Senate does not have any potentialization or lose sight of some of the current projects you might be working on. And especially when it comes to our omnibus bill, we help to streamline the updates and the legal code that you might be particularly having, just preventing from any outdated or ineffective rules that could be, hindering your BCU work or any missions you might be having this academic year. But overall, the liaison committee is made to be both your support system and an accountability measure, so we can make sure that it's in the body that's serving in the particular actions to help support you, and we can hear from your voice to help support you vice versa. But always, for any particular questions, that was added below here, it's contact either me or our others in the program, Merit, and below here as well. But feel free to reach out anytime.
Okay, we briefly covered this earlier, but I'll add some more detail to it. The appointing of regular board members of BCUs, as I mentioned, will be much simpler this year. So essentially, you just send to myself. You can find the email address there, as well as our first and second presidents pro tempore who make up the Senate leadership team. And importantly, we'll keep track of this in you can see the title here, the ASUCSB 25-26 appointment spreadsheet. And when I have to shout out First President Pro Tempore Sussman, especially for taking care of this and checking that each position actually exists in the legal code. And this might be really annoying when you just send in a simple appointment and then Evan in his very nice tone is like, hey, this actually doesn't exist, but he's in fact doing you a service so we can figure this out early on and it doesn't have to be reflected when the honoraria process comes around. And I know there's been some difficulties there and apologies if there's been some for example, bills that have been passed with new positions but haven't been reflected in the live doc, we're on it. And I'll get into the project tracker more when we get to the executive panel, but this is a part of a push of having all our resources and everything that does belong at the association-wide level, so appointments, projects, funding, you name it. We're trying to make everything available to all of you really easily, and this is one important step there.
And just adding a little time information, if you're going to be submitting your particular equipment, so one thing I'd love to highly just recommend and mention that when it comes to timeliness is very critical with the appointments. Delays in appointments can possibly hinder your BCU operations and event planning, and also it just makes it maybe particularly difficult for us to just help facilitate that and make it more easier for you guys to have that, updated faster. But overall, our IDP and process are not only this contact, but they will be in the upcoming year if you're working on any particular projects, your partners that will help ensure appointments are processed overall correctly. And this process overall is designed to help information quickly, so organizations can just overall begin their work while having to deal with any unnecessary connections or just particular confusing steps. But Feel free to always contact me for information as well as me and Senator Dan for any particular questions you might need on appointments.
Okay, this is an important step. I won't necessarily follow this step, maybe the step-by-step guide Iman can add on to later, but I'll just highlight some general notes that a student can, in fact, completely author a legal code change. I mean, there have been examples in the past where it'll say at the top of the document authored by first name, last name, and introduced by 2 senators. As we'll detail here, you can approach the liaison committee simply because it's the one that kind of makes the most sense. It's the committee already tasked with reaching out to BCUs and seeing what the Senate can do for you. But theoretically, you could approach any senator about any issue. So for example, if there's a housing legal code change you would propose and you know someone is focused on that issue, you could absolutely come up to them. And it's maybe worth mentioning that our process will look a little different for considering legislation this year. So usually it's if you submit a resolution, which as you will remember, doesn't change legal code, so you can vote on it at that very same meeting. And for a bill, the only process was you would submit it 1 week and then you can vote on it the next, which unfortunately, de facto would happen is people would very often not get a chance to read the legal code changes they were making. So in that spirit, we made it such that in our Senate standing rules, every piece of legislation is sent to the committee that is most relevant to what it's trying to accomplish, which is the case at the statewide and federal levels as well. So if there's let's say a housing bill, let's stick with that one, that would be tabled to advocacy perhaps, and they would consider it, see if they have any amendments and send it back. And I'm just letting you know of this so that if there is some kind of legislative initiative you have this year, just expect that it might take a little more time. But the idea there is that we much more closely consider what we're voting on, and every senator has had a chance to think about it before they submit their votes.
Yeah, and just some additional points, if you are a member or affiliated with any particular organization or BCU, well, as this is very connected processes, but I haven't well mentioned there are other also particular, committees, as I mentioned, who can help also further assist you if you are going to be impacting your following mission statements, such as advocacy committee, outreach committee, or finance. But if you ever get any additional foundational questions, I highly recommend just contacting us in the basic committee. We can help facilitate study for you and figure it out in the step-by-step process about here. But overall, this process helps to ensure that it's student driven, allowing us to have these close to campus to help propose particular reforms. And our attorney general and our staff members help to review and ensure that these legislative proposals are professional, compliant, and sustainable. Overall, it helps to balance this innovation with stability and just allowing us to help oversee a holistically legal code to make sure that it's all facilitating whatever legal code changes you might need to help just make sure it's as effective as possible.
Yeah, the attorney general point is important, but should not be overstated. It's not like that'll be something that's looked at for every piece of legislation that's submitted. That's only in the case of anyone, be it a senator or in collaboration with the BCU, submits a piece of legislation, and myself or the other members of Senate leadership have legitimate cause to think that this might be in contradiction to some piece of legal code. We just forward it to the Attorney General's office and get their opinion on it. The idea behind this is that you don't have a bunch of who are ultimately political elected officials doing that, but the sort of law enforcement, that's not the term for it. The institution that is supposed to be interpreting legal code, which is the Attorney General in this case, carry out that important function. Well, for why updating legal code matters is, I'll just give some simple reasons that I know Iman will want to add on. As we mentioned earlier, there have been certain instances in which we function outside of the confines of legal code. So appointments that maybe are not on there. The Senate does this all the time of, even task allocation, someone doing something which they're not supposed to do in legal code. As much as possible, as an institution that has a legal document that's supposed to be guiding it, we want to avoid that. And that'll be a huge conversation this fall quarter with what's called the Bill to Clean Up Legal Code, which will essentially update and bring that legal document much closer to how we actually function now, and get rid, if it passes, of course, get rid of about 80 pages of legal code, which would make it much easier for anyone interested to look at it and not have contradictions all over the place. So it'll make it a slightly more enjoyable reading experience.
Yeah,
Right.
and just like happens, celebrate you items, multiple some various issues, organization, happens to update your people, and how just, it's pretty explanatory, like how to update it as consistently and as efficiently as possible. To make sure you guys don't have to build any roadblocks, any particular problems along the way, as you continue your future and ongoing projects, and help keep us also informed on any particular legal coaching that you might have, and just ways to overall help support you in any additional needs you have about having to have decentralization or just miscommunication long-term wise, and just help to safeguard efficiency and ensure that AS maintains its values of transparency and accountability to the student body as well. Yeah, I can just probably kind of overall, sorry, not just about slides, so overall reiterate our commitment to you as members of the Senate body that our Senate is committed to transparency in the legislation, funding, appointments, overall to help ensure that every decision that you create, any questions you might have, we're able to support you with any particular assistance you need possible, and that our capability can be upheld through our evaluation systems and our feedback that we've created to help us support you with any additional needs you might have, and just collaborating with one another is truly the key to success this upcoming year with our guiding principles. That overall, the Senate body prioritizes to help open communication through our support, our facilitation, our conversations overall to be there to support you. And that ultimately, our Senate's role is to serve as both a support structure and a partner to all of you guys. However, as a body, they're committed to ensuring that your voices and your work is defined by the future voices of UCHG as well as the ASCC as well. And this is also just a little bit more of a final closing statement that overall the Senate is your partner in funding your work, confirming your leadership, updating the legal code, and advocating for students at UCP and beyond. We are here overall to bridge your gaps, provide clarity, and ensure your voices help shape ASCCP. And that we don't care, and we are trying to do our best to support you and all the particular students here as well.
If I can add one, I believe this is the final note before we move on to breakout questions.
I do one final.
Feel free. A penultimate note, is last week we had a retreat to Sacramento and we had a few internal trainings. We met with a state senator. We even got a tour of the Capitol. It was pretty nice. But one major theme that we kept coming back to is that we're well aware that the Senate has lost the trust of the student body and our fellow members of the association over the years. And there have been some very legitimate reasons for that. We want you to know that we're aware of it, that we're approaching the issue with concrete steps of how we can gain that trust back. And we know that pretty words or even prettier presentations as put together by Iman will not get us there. We want concrete steps. We want to focus on projects that better your lives on campus, and much more importantly, is support that will make your work and the projects you have planned that much easier. And that's what we commit ourselves to for the rest of this year.
And just, I'm going to task support towards that, but just overall, the Senate is basically your muscle, your support and your shoulders to lean on this upcoming academic year. And for students, students and staff alike, it's just similar to what Ivy Kulala mentioned, Adams has mentioned retreat last week. I actually just a brief particular advice to just carry something that I thought was really important, we should say it to what we should be collaborating on as just looking in the Senate body, that we should treat the community that we serve as like a relationship. Whether with students, AS, or staff, you must care for them, you must support them, you must listen to them. It is what brought me, as well as many of us here to vote and become in this particular position in the first place. And our goal is to this year, especially in these times of transition and the particular climates that we've decided and made a promise this year that we are here to dedicate ourselves to a new perspective of what the Senate truly is. And it's a body that truly helps to support and serve you. But thank you, and we love to hear any takeaway questions after the workshop.
Thank you, Angela. Okay, that is a slightly oddly cropped photo of us in front of the state capitol. So the idea is you break out for 5 minutes, you talk about your experiences with the Senate so far, what you hope it'll be like from now on. We'll give you 5 minutes and then let's come back. Let's have a conversation all together.
Yeah.
Good job.
I talked okay.
Oh, you did really well.
I was trying my best to talk, so I was like,
Oh, you did really well.
do you like the ending photo I added?
Really good.
Yeah, okay, cool. We're just gonna have maybe like a 5.
5:25? Because we gave him 5 minutes.
I'm still, I am still gonna keep going.
Oh, shit. And we're supposed to end at 6, right? Okay. Yeah, I'll just cut down the.
Can you do that? Yeah. of course, yes. We connect them to our- Yeah. Maybe laughing about it. Yeah, I do. Our dad's about living, you know. So I'm down. No, maybe on, you know. More posts, so probably consider. Talk about it. Yeah, I know. Sometimes we can do that. Sometimes I don't even have an Instagram account, so just like. trying to-
Okay, since we are slightly behind schedule, if you guys are ready, we are ready to take any questions. All right. Please give me a little. Please.
I asked why like 20.
Oh, yeah, I used to play on phone last year.
Repeat the question.
Absolutely. She asked, there are currently 22 appointed members of, elected members of the Senate, and there are 27 Senate positions by the case. Essentially, we have 5 on campus that are in a position, which is a nice thing, we have 5,000 students on campus. So, we're having a representative for each of that 1,000. But it doesn't work because there's not that many on-campus senators, rather on-campus students are running for Senate positions. Largely because most of them are too busy celebrating prom or whatever, their graduation, they're not students. And there are a few, so the smaller colleges in the area creative studies often don't have representatives. So we're gonna have ad hoc trainings committee which will fill those positions. If anyone's interested, AS experience committees for really good senators, so please feel free to apply. So
You reference changes to honorarium, can you speak to what those may look like?
Someone asked about potential changes to our area. So in the really, at the really immediate level, it's been about getting our area to be appointed much earlier, which we've already published. And getting them to meet much earlier, which will be either late this month or early the next. And getting those checks out for summer. But the much more important change is integrating visualization. What that means concretely is you don't have to wait for a paper check out there for months after it's been approved, even more months after you apply for it. But we go through that with the help of our amazing staff. We'll go through those checks of whether you are actually an appointed member of the association and kind of whatever checklist went over the GPA, all the rest of it. And there's a much more simplified process of evaluating our area going forward, and that gets sent out by the end of that quarter. So what it means concretely is one, much sooner, you're getting honorary at the end of the quarter, you apply for it rather than the end of a year later. And secondly, you get it straight to, this remains to be determined either to the bank account or digitally sent to your bank account, again, rather than having to pick up physical check and manually enter it as if this is banking.
Like an additional point towards that, or, but, prior to additional points, in comparison to all other various fifty students that are using percent, recent fees are the only ones that are with the remaining visualization, like remaining on the various systems that still lack visualization stuff, why particularly it's a little bit more it's a time, according to information when it comes to senior checks, which also why I already mentioned working to help fix that. We're monitoring on the system when it comes to senior checks to get as efficient and smart mitigated as possible.
See, 1 or 2 more before we move to the exec panel, if there's anything. It doesn't seem like, okay, thank you all again for your attention.
Thank you so much, Henry, and Ron, for that presentation. So now we're gonna get a chance to hear from the rest of your elected executive officers. So I'm very excited to introduce to the stage your Student Advocate General, Sydney Bivens. Your External Vice President of Statewide Affairs, Leah Cotta. Your External Vice President of Local Affairs, EJ Rad. And your Internal Vice President, Henry Lala. And this Q&A session will be facilitated by Interim Executive Director Sean Lieberman. So get your questions ready.
Do you round to hand the mic to any question?
Probably.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Just, I mean.
Thank you. All right, everyone's in the hot seat over there. We'll start things off easy. I know we just did name introductions and position introductions, but on our list, oh, there we go. And you can also look at the screen behind them. But let's also go with year, major, where you are from. And I added this at the last minute, your favorite emoji of the moment.
Hello, everyone. My name is Susie Bivens. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a student in general. I'm a senior sociology major, and I'm from Seattle, Washington. Oh, emoji. I'm gonna cheat on this one because I like have a favorite emoji combo. The kissy emoji without the heart and the music note emoji makes it look like he's whistling.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Cotta. I'm also use she, her pronouns. I'm a fifth-year transfer student in psychological and brain sciences and sociology double major. I live in San Jose, California, but I'm originally from Damascus, Syria. And my favorite emojis, I also couldn't choose between two, is like that little like, star bursting emoji and the hug emoji.
Hi, everyone. Long time no see. My name is Henry Lala. I'm the Internal Vice President. Fourth year history and global studies fellow major. Featured one of the centers as a Bangor Bar, Lisbon. I was born and raised in Albania, and I'm from the Palm Springs, Richland Valley region in California. And my favorite emoji is probably the salute one because it's really effective. You don't have to tell someone, oh, you got it, or have a, I don't know, really elaborate conversation. You just send that and it's over.
Hi everyone, my name is EJ Rad. I'm the External Vice President of Local Affairs. From the LA area. I'm a fourth year political science major. And my favorite, wait, no, I say fourth year, I'm a third year. I'm excited. I'm a third year political science major. My favorite emoji is probably the 100 emoji, like the red 100. It's just like emphasizes the point really well. So I
Hi again, I'm Leanne. I'm a fourth year majoring in global studies, communication, Spanish. My pronouns are she, her. I'm from the Pasadena area. And I think my favorite emoji that I've been using a lot right now is like the smiley face with the really like deadpan eyes. So I feel like sometimes you just have to smile, you know?
Good choice. All right, well, we'll start on this end since you have the mic. So can you tell us a bit about your AS or leadership background / experience and how it's led you to your current role?
Yeah, so I've been already shared about this earlier, so I'll keep it brief. But I started off in the Commission on Student Wellbeing, which is one of our VCUs focused on mental, physical, and nutritional health. And I actually applied for a completely different role and got offered the nutrition coordinator position. And I was like, I don't know anything about nutrition, but sure, I'll take it.
And little did I know I would end up getting super interested in AS, later. Later that year, I met, the girl who was running for internal vice president or special election, Sydney. And I ended up joining her office, and that kind of got me interested in more wider range, like bigger picture AS in functions. And yeah, from there, I kind of just ended up getting really involved. And last year, I had the chance to do a big project with Narcan in student housing. I think that really showed me that our ASPs can make an impact, and I figured, I already have this experience and this passion. Let's kind of go one step further and have more access to more resources, more money, so I can make a bigger difference on campus.
So I got my start last year. I was in the committee on committees, which takes like KSSHR, and I was the internal liaison. And then I started working in the Attorney General's office as a research associate. And that's kind of how I like learned a lot more about AS. I did some cool research projects about like the bad water conditions here and the housing and stuff like that. So I got interested in Isla Vista. And then I was encouraged to run for EDPLA by Mr. Aaron Carlson, my good friend Noah Lucan over there. And so I ran, and then yeah, so I ended up here.
I began my involvement on campus as I assume many of us here not within AS, but actually within RCOs. So my first 2 years were mostly focused on, I was part of this policy debate team called Ethics Bowl, which sounds a little nerdy, but it's actually pretty cool to compete with, around competing with colleges from across California, the nation, placed second in the nation, first UCW, so a few years ago, so, still pretty good those where it is. I was also founder of this organization called Youth for Housing, which essentially advocates for student housing issues. And I brought those interests into AS. I was engaged director, the office of the president, with Lena a few years ago. And then I was an off-campus senator last year and focused on very much the same kinds of issues. Housing and campus infrastructure. And from my experience in RCO, I saw how the funding process can actually be really, really difficult. And that still influences my work in making travel fees and other kinds of fees much easier to get through for RCOs.
So I also kind of started off with RCOs, but I got the privilege of serving as an off-campus senator and also serving at Senate. And I really chose to get into that role because of certain advocacy that I felt was lacking for marginalized groups on our campus. And so that even that sense of advocacy is why I chose to continue my work in AS and APPSA role, because I feel like that's really where I can advocate for a lot of different communities that are under attack, especially with this new administration. As we touched on before, there's just so many unprecedented times that we're living in right now. But I also had the privilege of attending our student lobbying conference and Hill Day, in which I learned to lobby and advocate for different communities, both at our state and federal capital. But yeah, advocacy is really just an intrinsic part of who I am, even before I transferred to UCSB. I work with a lot of different grassroots advocacy organizations that I can say. I was also encouraged by the previous CDPSA to come into this film. I started actually in the same office that I'm in now, office of the student advocate. I started as a caseworker 2 years ago under student advocate general Lee. And back then I didn't even know that it's a paid position with honoraria. I thought it was a volunteer situation where I'd be taking phone calls. It was very different than the actual role. But it was at a time when post-COVID, we weren't getting a lot of cases, and we didn't have infrastructure in the office. So I have a lot to go off of. So as an academic caseworker, I took on my first case, kind of having to make things on my own. With it ended up being like a 53-page appeal for a student, and that experience helped me build the infrastructure in our office, and I for our casework division, and I moved up into internal chief of staff the next quarter, and then worked there, continued my work in casework, and then moved up to a chief of staff position where I was working much more closely with last year's student attorney general Alvin Wong. So now I'm just continuing the good work in this office, advocating for students and yeah, mediating between them and the university.
All right, thanks so much. Moving on to the next question. Each of your roles are multifaceted and expansive. For those who don't know, what are, let's say, 3 things that your office does? And if you can tie that into what those things that you offer that the officers out here can come to you for.
Yeah, I just mentioned casework. I'd say that's the core of our office. That's one aspect of what we do is a big part of it. The second aspect is more external advocacy. So this can be projects or advocacy on a more policy level at the university, the like administration. But also like adding like hosting Know Your Rights events and adding modules that inform the student body about what resources are out there and like what are their rights. So we have our external directors and we have our technology subcommittee that also runs the Go Gaucho Act, and you guys can use that. And then our third aspect of the office is the Conduct and Ethics Committee, which is not as well known. But essentially it rules over alleged policy 1 violations, which is policy that covers like abuse of conduct and bullying. So in the event that you felt like you were being mistreated, targeted, harassed in any sort of way, our Conduct and Ethics Committee could cover that. And I, as the student attorney general, can act as a mediator to support you through, those kinds of difficult interpersonal moments. So that is a resource that any of you guys, if you have a problem along those lines in the association, you can absolutely come to my office.
So I would say the main mission of my office is to really advocate for, protect, and uplift students as a student representative to the UC Regents and UC President. I also serve as a board member of the UC Student Association, which for those of you who are not as familiar with them, their main mission is to make higher education more accessible and equitable to students, especially those of marginalized backgrounds. What people most like, those who aren't familiar with my office might be most familiar with the fact that we host and provide travel for different conferences and lobby days in which we go to Sacramento, DC, but also with different UC campuses to learn how we can better learn to lobby and also advocate for communities on our campuses. Yeah, I also will host or have regular meetings with the UC president in which I advocate for the needs of students at UCSB, but also on a UC-wide level. And like UCSA will have 5 campuses that we focus on each year within our lobbying days. And that's something that I still want to touch on in the later questions.
I would break down the functions of the offices here into 3. The first would be the administrative concern, also the honor area appointments process that we are concerned. The second would be being student representatives, the administration level. The third would be as a producer and supporter of projects, be it presented within the office or supporting other BCUs. The traditional reason for reaching out to me for vice president of the office has been honorary generally with some very understandably upset student asking whether checks are really positive, this kind of thing. And the hope is that with we would improve the honorary process such that it doesn't need to be that common a theme of interaction between the executive and BCU level. And we're really confident in making real progress on that in fall quarter, getting it fully implemented this year. The second part would be, as I shown previously, communicating to the administration level on those impactful projects. So I've already mentioned housing and the bike path project, which we of course need your support on. We're also looking at reforming one of the positions in the IDP's office to be an academic affairs director, because that's the role that is explicitly assigned in the office in legal code, but hasn't really been a part of its functions for many years. So if you're basically looking at that kind of issue, or if that have had something you think should be restructured, we would be your office to look at it and reach out to the relevant department. And the third would be, supporting the Senate in getting out many more projects this year than previous ones. And also supporting PCUs when they are the entity that is best capable of pursuing that project. So I think the best example there is the Black Community and the Black Gun project. They have done all the mapping out of the potential project. They've led the conversation with the administration. I see my role and the role of other elected representatives as supporting them and strengthening their negotiation position about getting funding for that bike project, and not necessarily having to lead the conversation ourselves. So this is what I have to look forward to.
So my office's primary responsibility is representing students in Isla Vista, and it sort of breaks down into a lot of different things. One of the big ones is just speaking with, negotiating, and maintaining relationships with a lot of the institutions in Isla Vista. That's for instance like the police, like ID Foot Patrol, as housing companies, all those sorts of things. We look into and do and represent students on. Then it also breaks down into things we do like events. So at the Portal Center, we hold events. We have fun stuff like spring fling. We have informative stuff like our town halls we do for Deltopia and for Halloween. And so that's kind of what we do with Portal in conjunction with the amazing staff there. And then we also provide services there. So we have like the SCI screen-a-thons that we do, where students can come and get like SCI screen. And actually one announcement is pretty exciting. We're going to be doing flu shots there now for the fall for free. So that'll be cool for students to get, your flu shot or whatever in October. It'll be sometime hopefully in October. We're still figuring that out. So yeah, that'll be cool. And then we also do UCID. Those are like the tents that you see out on nights out, like about like water, food, Narcan, all that sort of stuff. So they provide like a non-police medical intervention service. So those are the main things that we do in our office.
So the purpose of the Office of the President, I see, is to do projects that improve the life of students on campus, and then also to kind of be the mediator of connection between students and campus. So we've got an environmental affairs commissioner who has connections with all the environmental orgs on campus. We've got the arts and culture director who liaises with arts and lectures, the multicultural center, and all places like those, the arts institute, places like that. We've got transfer student coordinator who works for transfers, and then myself, I'm kind of the representative of the students and the association to the chancellor, so you would hire campus administration. So really anything you might need, any resources, anytime you might be stuck, I need like to work with someone and I don't know who, or they're not responding or anything like that. Or you just don't know how to get started on the project, my office can definitely help you with that.
So you all have touched upon this a little bit, but what's, let's say, one project or goal that you have this year, maybe that you haven't mentioned, that you'd like to accomplish?
Okay. One big one that we're working on right now is the Rate My Landlord website. So the idea is that students can like basically put their reviews of different properties, different landlords, and so we can like talk about those on this website, the forum style website. I think it's like pretty neat because I don't know if you guys, like, when I signed a lease, like for this last year, like I really saw the place. So you kind of go in blind. It's nice to know like what you're actually going into and hear about, you know, how the place is from the tenants before you. So that's something that we're working on. We're gonna be starting on that and excited to get that out to students.
EJ's office and mine are working on quite a few projects, together, and they range from, you know, food insecurity, one I mentioned, one of the prior workshops, even as merchandising, running some time this year. There's one I deeply care about called the Mount Long project, based on an idea by a purely departed friend of mine who wanted to bring Bloomberg terminals to campus, which are essentially these highly advanced software which allow you to trade and look at quantity of this kind of thing, and that would be a resource that would of our competitiveness, so bring us up par with UCLA and other top universities. But I think one that I really want to highlight is little meta, is not necessarily a project, but the project tracker that my Learning Accountability sent out a few days ago. Because I think that I'm not making this up, it's not one of those like isolated events and solve all my problems. Just this last week, it helped us identify 2 projects that we were multiple teams working on with zero collaboration. So we were just both pursuing it independently of each other. And I think we will identify potentially dozens of those cases. It's as simple as someone else working on this, let's pull our efforts into it, let's combine it, or maybe we don't need some students anymore. And it's as useful a tool as we make it. And I think there's a lot of potential for ASY collaboration soon.
So, since I said you want to speak a bit more than just one project or goal, but one of the main goals that I have in my office is to really protect those like communities that are most under attack with this new federal administration. That is like a very amount of communities, but those like most specifically are undocumented, mixed status, and immigrant or international students. As we see very like things we've never seen in our history before with ICE even coming onto our UC campuses. Luckily, we haven't seen that UCSB just yet, but I think working with the administration to ensure that that is not even a possibility, that these agents are not welcome. Luckily, like we also have been working on the legislative level with like lobbying wise to pass bills like SB 98, which is like more commonly referred to as the SAFE Act, which ensures that both now K through 12 and universities have to notify the community members, students, and families of those who are around those schools and universities whenever immigration services are on their campus. The maybe quick little shout out because that was actually co-authored by UCSB alum Mr. Pia. And so just giving students opportunities to work on bills like that to protect their communities, but also like not only just working with administration to see what they will do, because unfortunately we've seen almost no acknowledgement or response from the UC administration on these IRS or attacks on students. But working with offices like the Student Advocate General to go and do things like know your rights campaigns. I recently had the honor of meeting with some representatives of Union de Barrio, which is a LA-based organization that works on community protection against ICE. And I'm hoping to have them come and do something like a know your rights and community protection training on our campus soon. So yeah, that's just one of the many things. Another quick little thing is I'm really going to continue the project of the previous CVPSA was to establish a disabled student center on our campus, as we don't really have one of those, and also just making things more accessible on our campus, like general things like our ramps, students often complain about, and there's many areas on campus that the emergency was to bring out that these disabled students would not be properly provided for, given like a proper escape route. One of my major goals for this year is educating the student body on their rights as well as the resources available to them. We obviously do this through casework and tabling and those good things, but like, they mentioned, know your rights events are definitely something that I'm looking forward to hosting this year. For vulnerable populations, but like undocumented students, but also for the student body at large to understand the conduct process, you know, how does that work and what are their rights in that process? We want to make sure that students are cared for, and that they know what they have available to them. So, yeah.
You pass that back to Leanne if you.
I already talked about most of my projects, but something I'm particularly excited about is the Ivy Farmers Market. We should get up and running in a few months. I don't know exactly when, but I think my projects is really focused on basic needs, food security, housing safety, and things like that.
All right, one last question before we take some from the audience. What's the most unexpected thing you've discovered about associated students or campus at large and how things work basically in your time within the organization so far?
I mean, one of them would make sense at the beginning of this, that things are, as you all know, quite difficult to do, and it's an unruly bureaucracy in many ways. You know, virtually anywhere it forms into after a while, but I think what I've been surprised by is the amount of people willing to help you along the difficult path and how capable many of them are. So I count all of the fellow executives out here, people I've interacted with in the Senate or across PCUs, across, even when I worked, as the president. Don't be discouraged because you can, it takes maybe a little more persistence than you originally accounted for, but you can come up with some projects that you look back at and are kind of in disbelief that actually happened because of how difficult the ACE process is. So this should be remembered in my mind. I think this will be remembered as projects here, not only for the Senate, not only for us execs. But I really think that we're well positioned to support BCs and coming up with some incredible things as well. Don't discourage yourself. You can come up with some incredible things.
I guess a bit more like a simple answer would be one of the most shocking or unexpected things to me as like a newcomer in AS and senator last year is that when I actually got to get a better look at the budget and just how much money we really are in control of as senators. It was just shocking. Like I've never seen numbers like that, like financially in my life. So that's like the main thing. What was most shocking to me was how few university administrators actually knew about associated students and what we do. Not on like the very high up level, but like those offices like Title IX and Office of International Students and Scholars and Financial Aid Office, like these kinds of entities. There were so many people that did not know what we do. So thankfully, you know, we've met with these administrators and have, you know, explained the role of associated students. But yeah, that was pretty surprising to me.
Mine's a pretty different answer. Mine's like, I mentioned earlier how I did that research on the tap water here, and I was just surprised at how like actually terrible it is. It's like very illegal. So I would say anybody here like don't drink it without a filter. Like I really would not recommend it. It's like borderline and like every inorganic compound you put in water without it being illegal. Like you add a little bit more, it would be illegal. So I would really say don't drink the tap water. So I guess my answer is a little different, but that's what I was.
I learned that CLS projects really are like the way to get things done. If you really mobilized. When it came to the Narcan student housing project, I was told by Doctors for Recovery that no, like student housing doesn't support it, like we've tried and they just don't want to do it. And we didn't let that stop us, so instead we made a plan. We said, okay, this is what we're gonna do, we're gonna pay for it, you just need to say yes and install it. And they said, okay, sure, why not? And it didn't end up being that hard, but because it came from students and because we had the initiative to actually make the plan as opposed to waiting for them to say, okay, sure, like this is what we should do. Like, just take initiative and do it.
Thank you. Those are great answers. So Holly's gonna walk, has the flashlight on her phone, but has the microphone, so she's gonna walk around, and if you have any questions, raise your hand.
I have a question for the external vice president of local affairs, Mr. E.J. Rad. Given that the water quality is so tremendous in Isla Vista and in our community, what do you plan to do to address that?
That's a wonderful question. So we're gonna actually be doing some free water filter distribution. We want to do it through the Barwell Center. We're working on that right now. It should be pretty simple, just like buying them. We have the money for them. So buy a bunch of brand filters or whatever brand is good, and it's just like giving them out literally for free. So I think that's like the biggest, most immediate way that a lot of students can like have better water is just having a water filter. I think most students do have them. Like most people I've talked to. But occasionally like, oh, dude, I just tap water and I'm like, dude, stop. So yeah, that's what I would say is some immediate services we can provide for students to do themselves filter and have good clean drinking water.
Any other questions out there?
What?
Hi, this is for the external vice president of state managers. You also do deal with protests and things like that on campus, and how is that kind of factor into what you do for position? So I wouldn't necessarily say that my office is something that organizes those protests, but I would do like work in very close relation with a lot of the organizations that might be hosting those. So also just protecting the student rights of those who choose to participate in those events is something that my office definitely focuses on. But also like being a resource to go and combat things like the time-based and manner restrictions that were recently gone. Well, they have been a thing that has been in UC history, but they were recently re-implemented or emphasized to go and restrict student protests as they typically are hubs of activism. So that's something that you know, just like this statewide federal level that we're going to work to combat, and just like the DC regions going and protecting those students' rights. Because that is part of your right as a student to protest. So not necessarily that like organizing, but protecting those rights of those who choose to engage. Thank you.
My question was, you had the UPS, but if any other executive would like to chime in, given threats, cuts to and threats to funding at both federal and state level, what do you guys plan to do to address that? Particularly when it will affect student services, or particular groups. That's why I'm going to direct it to the previous ed that may be affected by those cuts.
Yeah, so actually, thank you for asking about that, because that was one of the goals that I did want to mention. One of the UCSA campaigns that we did vote on to push on the UC-wide level in our lobbying and advocacy is the One the UC campaign, in which there is a proposed 8% budget cut to the UC. It actually just in these last couple of days was reduced to 3% budget cut, but we still are seeing a $500 million like cut to UCLA's grants.
a lot of placements you see that even I know UC president is working to address. So just working with the administration to go and see what we can do as students, but continue to do that as like organizers and lobbying, like students who go and lobby to these officials to continue to push for those to not have these budget cuts. Luckily, we were successful in reducing it by 5%, but just not for those cuts at all, but obviously the ideal. But yeah, just I think also being in communication with administrations that straight out when if those budget cuts do come to our campuses, that a lot of these services that protect our students that are most at risk are still protected.
I think the UPSA office is much better positioned to deal with cuts before they come into place and lobby beforehand, but sometimes we just must deal with them once they've been made a reality. Without trying not to say too much here, but the issue, I'm sure you're all aware of this, the cutting of the study, and it's something that myself and the Senate has been trying to address in the last week or so. And maybe wouldn't be super productive to get specifics, but I think the idea behind it is to remember that we got vast resources as an association. There are places in which we can step in and provide some of the funding that is being unrightfully stripped away from students. But at the same time, that the bulk of our power is the student representatives of 26,000 voices, and not necessarily just administrators of a fund. So I think we want to be cautious of stepping in and offering funding to begin with, when we can just make the case for those not being cut in the first place, or finding another alternate solution. And only when there is no other route, we exercise all other options, we step in with funding. And we must begin by making our rules clear.
I think the UPSA and the UCSA do a really good job of organizing students to lobby against these cuts. Where I come into play as president is I sit on a council of presidents, which includes all of the UC undergraduate and graduate presidents, so there's 19 of us. And we have direct communication, or are supposed to, pending this new president, with the UC president, the UC office of the president, and that's where we can advocate for our student wants and needs and really encourage like the decisions that we want to be made, and also speaking at regents meetings. And also talking with the chancellor and the president about, reminding them that students really are the backbones of the university, and so if we have to cut student services, then students are not going to want to come here, and then they're not going to get our tuition. And yeah, just really reminding them that it's not just about like research or anything else, but it's about students.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing too, at least my opinion, it's like, if something gets cut, we should just provide it ourselves. Like, we have the money to do so much, and so if services get cut because of federal funding issues, like AS should just do it. So for instance, like even with like student health has had a lot of cuts to a lot of their services lately, and I've heard, I don't know if it's like fully true, but I've heard there might be an issue now with like vaccines or offering vaccines that might start limiting that. It's something I heard, which is one of the big reasons I want to include that as something we offer through the Hartwell Center with the SD neighborhood clinics. And then even going forward, we're even talking to them right now to start offering like basic dental services, so doing like cleanings and stuff like that, we want to be able to do. So my opinion is like, we have a lot of money as an association and millions of dollars, if something gets cut, like, it's on us to step up and just provide it ourselves.
Any last question? All right, it's a good way to go out. So we're at time. So thank you so much to our executives for speaking with us. And to all of you. So I'm gonna pass the mic back to Leanne.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you all of you guys. So we've come to the last portion of AS1. Thank you all for staying. So I'm gonna ask before we head into dinner, for you to please put on your AS t-shirt and head out to the lawn so that we can take a group picture. And then come back, grab your sandwiches, and we'll go out to the lawn, have a sunset picnic. Are there lawn games?
Yes, Mike, just Colby.
Okay, there'll be lawn games, and if you stay till the end, I have a raffle for 3 $10 gift cards to local Ivy places. And if you leave, you will leave. You must be present to win. So I hope to see you all out there.
Alrighty. Okay. Michael did not come as early as he had thought he did. That is okay.